You're muted. You're muted. All right. Let's get started, everyone. So welcome to day 2 of our goal setting and motivation curriculum for healthy gamer coaches. So welcome, everyone. I know we're trying something a little bit different for people who are unfamiliar with what we're doing today. I'll just share a little bit about that in a second. So the first thing is welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name's Alok Kanoja. I'm a psychiatrist practicing in Boston. Just a reminder that everything we discuss on stream today is intended to be for educational purposes only, and nothing is intended to be taken as medical advice. I think hopefully that's pretty clear today, because we're going to be doing day 2 of our goal setting and motivation curriculum for our coaching program. So we're trying something a little bit new this week at Healthy Gamer. So a lot of people, like thousands of people, have expressed interest or curiosity about becoming coaches. I also know that a ton of people in our community are really interested in like understanding motivation. So part of what we're going to be doing today is teaching our coaches like how to think about goal setting and motivation. We're going to be explaining some principles of psychology and neuroscience and things like that. And I think actually it can be useful for people in our community to kind of like learn this stuff on their own. One or two interesting kind of points to remember. The first is that this is not really geared towards a DIY perspective, right? So this is a training that we do for our coaches so that they can help other people do it. So that perspective may be a little bit different. So a lot of people had questions yesterday about like, can I do this myself? How do I do this by myself? There are certainly ways of doing that, but that's not quite the focus. So we're still going to share all the principles because we think those are useful. But especially today, for example, we're going to share some of the mechanisms through which behavioral change happens in from a neuroscience perspective. And so some of those mechanisms are specifically inform how we've designed our coaching program. So our coaching program is sort of designed to take advantage of some of these things, which it may be harder for you to implement kind of on your own, but you can absolutely sort of still benefit from them. So we're going to kind of hop in with the coaches in a second. Just a couple of things to, quick up reminders really more than anything else. The first is that if y'all are curious about, how coaching works and how to sign up, we do have about a 20% discount right now for people who sign up, which will end on September 20th. So September 20th is the launch of our next batch, cohort 4 of coaches. And so at this point, we've really kind of buffed up our training. We kind of know what we're looking for. Cohort 4 is also far more international. So I think a little less than half of them are bilingual. So we're trying to serve other communities and other, places of the world where English is not the primary language. So if y'all want to go ahead and sign up for coaching, you can do that now. We also have, you can now book into the future, which is a new feature that we've added to our platform. So like you don't have to wait until a spot opens up. You can kind of claim your spot for the future. And if y'all are curious about, what coaching is and whether it can help you or not, we have coaches that are going to be showing up on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 4:30 Central Time this week. So y'all can hop into Discord and just ask them, hey, this is my problem. Is this something that you think is appropriate for coaching? For people who are curious about, what the scope of coaching is, we talked yesterday at the very beginning about the differences between coaching and therapy and sort of shared, information from the National Association of Social Workers here in the United States and how they kind of think about therapy and how they define therapy and what the scope of their work is. And we also looked at some of the competencies for coaches according to the International Coaching Federation, which sort of highlights that coaching is really more about, building positive and like designing goals, setting goals, and achieving goals. Whereas the focus of therapy tends to be more pathology oriented. It's not that therapists can't help you achieve your goals. In fact, a lot of the good ones do. It's just that if you look at their formal training, like what their expertise is and what they're trained on. So for example, clinical social workers need 3,000 hours of supervised clinical work. So that's like going to a mental health clinic and treating people with depression and anxiety and things like that. It's not like going to a place where you're trying to help someone change their job, right? That's not what their goal is. It's not, going to a place and sort of helping someone like lose weight. Like that's not usually what that entails. Now, there are definitely, cases of that. So for example, there are sometimes like, actually they're usually coaches, but even at like weight loss clinics and stuff like that, occasionally you'll have a therapist, but oftentimes they actually have like wellness coaches and things like that, which are coaches and not therapists. So I guess that kind of defeats that point. So that's kind of what we're sharing with y'all today. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay. Y'all ready to get going? So the other thing, just to orient people who are joining stream, is that I'm in a separate call with our coaches. So they're the ones that I'm actually going to be teaching. And so, y'all will hear disembodied voices, which we are kind of keeping disembodied for a reason, just to kind of protect their privacy. I see some of them have their full names in the Zoom meeting, so we don't want to leak those. So we're not going to, hopefully we won't, y'all won't see the Zoom meeting. Just to be safe though, I would strongly recommend that y'all get rid of your last name. Just in case I have like a technical error, which I'm prone to do. Okay, so let's kind of get started. We're going to start today by kind of recapping what we learned about yesterday. So I'll ask y'all a little bit about what were the key takeaways from yesterday. Then I'll lay out our kind of what we're going to do today, and then we'll sort of dive into the content. Okay, so we'll start with sort of a recap. So what were y'all's key takeaways from yesterday?
That motivation is an emergent property.
Good. So what do we mean by that?
That it's like more of like it comes from like a external observation.
Okay. What do we mean by that?
Of where sometimes when you look within yourself, there's no motivation, but you can find like desires and emotions. But when you kind of observe someone else and like, oh, they're like quote unquote crushing it, you kind of define them as someone who is motivated.
Yeah, so that's a great way to put it, Ken. So what I would say is that, motivation is a concept that comes from comparing someone else's outsides to your insides. When you look at someone externally and you say, oh, this person is motivated, but their internal experience is not motivation. Their internal experience is a combination of different things like duties, obligations, like certain resistances, habits, desires, all these so the conclusion that we kind of came to, or that I started with actually, is that, there's no Sanskrit word for motivation because motivation does not capture the internal experience of what we kind of face and struggle with on a day-to-day basis. Great recap. What else what were the other takeaways? Anyone? Bueller?
Our goals should be iterative.
Excellent.
Meaning that we have to fail at them and keep adapting as we go.
Excellent. Yeah. So I think this is a huge, you wanted to say something, Pam?
Yeah, I was going to say that one of the big takeaways that I got from yesterday was about there being like the three parts to motivation of there being intent, resistance, and the action. And that you can have, if you want to like affect your motivation, you can try to do something to each of those things to have a better outcome for your motivation.
Perfect. Right. So I think y'all hit the main point. So the second thing is that our model of motivation is designed with three pieces. And this is the kind of the big issue with motivation, is that we use this umbrella term motivation, which is actually like a conglomerate of different psychological, neuroscientific, physiological processes, right? So there's a lot of stuff that goes into motivation. And despite having the highest access to quality resources on motivation, we have the least motivated generation on the planet. And so how can we understand that? Like, despite having so much information, why are people so unmotivated? And I think the issue that it comes down to is that, it's an issue of it's a diagnostic problem. So your motivation has these three components. They have the intent that you put into the action, the resistance that you experience when you try to do something, and then there's the actual action itself, which a lot of times will be like poorly formulated. So a quick example of that is, let's say that, I want to get in shape. So there can be a lot of desires that I have to get in shape. Like, for example, I should get into shape, and I know that in some vague intellectual level that being out of shape is not healthy for me. The second thing is that since I'm out of shape, I feel like fear and shame when I go to the gym. I feel embarrassed. I feel judged. I feel like an idiot. And so anytime I try to take action, there's like things that pop up that resist the action. And then there's the action that I kind of define, or the goal that I define for myself, which oftentimes does not help me achieve it. So I know that sounds kind of weird, but like get in shape is not something you can do. So, it's kind of interesting because if I set a goal for myself, which is get in shape, like how do I succeed at that? Like there's nothing quantifiable there. There's no like clear sense of what progress is. So even if I get up and go to the gym and overcome like my fear or shame, like for a week in a row, at the end of that week, am I in shape? I don't get any positive reinforcement. And so then I abandon my goal. So one of the key things that we're trying to teach y'all today is, over the course of this training, is that as a coach, the more that you understand these three pieces and clarify these pieces, the better outcomes you'll get with your client. The more motivated your clients will be, the more they'll actually be able to change their behavior. What did you say, Steve? I kind of lost sight of it for a second, but I remember it was good.
I was talking about goals being iterative and how we have to fail at them and continue to adapt.
Perfect. So that's the other key thing that we sort of took away from yesterday, which is as people try to do this on their own, even if they understand intent, resistance, and action, like they can give it a shot and they can kind of do okay. Maybe they'll succeed, maybe they won't. But really your responsibility as a coach is to help them iterate, right? So like if I go to the gym for a week and I feel like I haven't made any progress and I quit, then I'm going to feel like ashamed of myself. And then I'm going to feel like a quitter. It may form my identity. I may say, oh my God, like I'm a quitter. So as a coach, like part of the biggest thing that you bring to the table is the ability to support your clients emotionally, help them pick themselves back up and iterate on the process. Because putting your life together is not like finding a magic bullet. It's about figuring out for yourself what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And one of the key things as a coach that you can help people do is you can accelerate that process by being objective, by pointing out their cognitive biases, by sort of emotionally supporting them, helping them decompress that like fear and that shame or whatever so that they can take action. So fantastic summary. Any questions from yesterday? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that one other key takeaway that you kind of said at the beginning and somewhat toward the end is like that motivation is where we can see a lot of the differences between what we do in coaching and therapy. That it's about diagnosing and treatment and being focused on pathology and fixing something that's broken. And we're about building something positive or making a constructive program.
Absolutely. So that's so yeah. Well said, Alan. Thank you very much. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to outline what we're going to cover today. So the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to try to redeem myself in terms of physics. So we're going to revisit the Ohm's law and sort of explain. I think like basically all the analogies were correct. I just kind of mistakenly wrote out the equation. So we're just going to revisit that for, personal pride and my own hero's journey and redemption arc. Second thing that we're going to do is talk about the 4-dimensional intent model, which is a key model that we're going to kind of use to help our clients sort of raise awareness and like understand why they're doing what they're doing. The second thing we're going to talk about is raising awareness of the negative. So this is something that oftentimes our clients kind of don't do that we can do that'll help them a lot in terms of achieving their goals. The fourth thing that we're going to do is understand the neuroscience of behavioral change and sort of why we kind of do what we do in the way that we do it. And then the last thing that we'll kind of cover is like we'll sort of end up doing a recap and have some space for questions. Okay, so any questions about that? Okay. Work, please. There we go. All right. So let me start by doing this. Okay, and then I got a screen share over here. Great. Okay, can you all see this? Okay, so let's start with Ohm's law, okay? Point number 1. So I said that originally, for some reason, I thought it was V over IR, but really the equation is V equals IR. But I think the truth of it is actually the same. So if we kind of think about it for a given voltage, and remember that a voltage is a potential difference, okay? So like the potential, if we talk about gravitational potential, the gravitational potential difference of these 2 points is this much. The gravitational potential difference between these points is this much. So this is a greater potential difference. We good there? So, and if we're talking about, resistance, we can kind of think about a narrow straw or a wide straw. So this is going to have a higher R, and this is going to have, relatively speaking, a lower R. And the current, or the I, is the amount of flow that we get through this. Okay, so what kind of goes in here and comes out the other end. So the other way what we really should have done is I should have written the equation like this. V over R equals I, or, so this is incorrect, I equals V over R. And what we kind of find is that this is essentially the picture that we drew. So if we have a particular straw, of a fixed resistance. As we tilt the straw from here to here to here, what happens to the amount of water that's going to flow out this end? Anyone?
You get more of it.
You're going to get more of it, right? So what we can see here is that we're changing V. So V is what we're changing. So if we increase V and we hold resistance constant, what's going to happen to I?
Goes up.
Absolutely, right? So now so we'll get to V. So V is actually going to be like the action phase. So the other way that we can think about it is that if we hold, for any given scenario, if we kind of increase I, and so there are other ways to kind of think about it, right? So if we increase I and we hold, R constant, once again, let's say that we don't change anything in our resistance, then what's going to happen to V?
It'll also go up.
Absolutely, right? So this is like the actual action taking. So if we improve our intent, then our actions will actually increase. If we improve our actions, like if we make actions easier to accomplish, it's not so much that our intent will increase, but the energy or the outflow will increase. And then the other thing that we can kind of think about is if we lower lower R with a given amount of intent, or actually this is where things are going to get confusing, but if we sort of say that we're putting the same amount of water into the equation, what's going to happen to V? I guess V will.
It'll go up.
Nope, it'll go down, right? So this is where our sort of analogy falls apart, which is important to acknowledge because this is not actually a principle of physics. So this is kind of a situation where ideally what would happen is that as we increase resistance, like I don't know what this scenario looks like practically, but as we decrease resistance for a given set of action, I think this is what we would see. This is like more practically like what we would see. Right? If we decrease our intent or our energy into the system will actually increase. So this is kind of where things fall apart. This is sort of really what we're looking at in a more realistic sense. At the end of the day, though, what we're sort of talking about is this this diagram, right? Where this is the intent, this is the resistance, and this is the action. And so if we reduce the R, it'll make it easier to get to the action. If we increase the intent, it'll become easier to kind of overcome this hump. And if we make the action easier to accomplish, that'll kind of decrease the activation curve, or it'll increase the potential difference and will make it easier to actually act. So, we use principles like physics and stuff kind of to illustrate conceptually what happens, but I don't actually know that Ohm's law, there's no science that I've ever seen that Ohm's law actually applies to behavior. Okay, questions about Ohm's law? Okay. Now we get to the 4 types of intent, or the 4 dimensions of intent. So when someone says, I have a goal, what are the 4 things that could be driving this person? Like, why do people pick goals?
Like outside pressure, like family or a society or something.
Okay, so pressure, excellent. Society, family, what else?
Values.
What do you mean by that?
It's like something they care about.
Okay. So when someone feels pressured and they say a goal, they're saying that I have to accomplish this goal. What is the verb that they use? I know it's kind of a weird.
Need.
Okay, good. Excellent. What else do they say?
Should.
Absolutely. Okay. So what else goes into, why someone does something?
It's their duty.
Okay. So duty. So what's the word that they use there? So care about is a good example of a value. What's the word that they use?
Responsibility?
Absolutely. Right? Or obligation. So do you guys see how like these are different things? What I should do is different from, and we'll get to should and obligation in a second, because you could say that your duty is what you should do. And I'd say the key, well, let's just talk about it now. So I think the big difference is like the duty is like owed to someone else. And there are all kinds of things that you should do that you don't owe to someone else. Does that make sense? Like I should eat healthier, but that's not like a duty. It's just, I should eat healthier because society, judges me because of my body type. And if I don't want to be poorly judged by society, or my family makes fun of me for being like overweight or underweight or whatever, like that's a should, but it's not something that I owe someone. So you can use the word should for duty, but this is exactly the point of like having this discussion, because these are actually different internal drives that share the same language. And so when people use unsophisticated language, they don't diagnose the problem correctly. Like, I'm sick. So as a doctor, it's like, sick with what, right? Like, there isn't medicine for sickness. There are treatments for diseases, and we need specificity of our language to figure out where the problem is so that we can fix it. There's one big bucket that we're missing.
Wants?
Desire or wants?
Yeah, perfect. Desires, right? This has nothing to do with duty or obligation. It's like sometimes, Dr. K just needs a hot dog. Like that has nothing to do with, what I should be eating or values or anything like that. It's just like I smell, there's some Korean corn dog place that opened up sort of near where I live. There's always a line out the door. I don't actually like really want to eat it, but sometimes when I walk by, I get curious and I smell it. And so that's, there are desires, right? I want to play League because I want to school some noobs. So if we kind of look at these, one of the things that I kind of notice is that some of these result in a loss for me. Like I have to give something up. And some of these result in a gain. And then the other kind of dimension is that some of these lead to like external, what's the term I want to use here? I figured out a good term. Yeah, so external reward and internal reward. Okay. So where do y'all think desires go? Which quadrant would you put them in? When I satisfy my desires, do I gain something or do I lose something?
Gain.
Absolutely. And do I gain an internal reward or an external reward?
External.
Yeah, so this is where desires go. So this is going to be kind of weird, but like I define external reward as something that includes a bodily satisfaction, right? It's like some kind of pleasure. So let's think a little bit about the things that I should do. Like my family wants to become a doctor. Where does that go? Is that a gain or a loss for me?
It's a loss.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. So you got to run with my system here, okay? It's not, this isn't science. There's no Ohm's law for this. This is Dr. K's impression. Like I have to give something up. That's the way I kind of think about a loss, right? So I have to give up potentially like my own happiness. And what about internal reward or external reward? What's the advantage of doing things that I should do?
It's an external reward.
Absolutely, right? So I want to be a professional video gamer, but that's not a respectable profession. And I can't really hold my head up high while I'm grinding like a professional video game. But if I'm a doctor and I put that on my Tinder profile, that comes with a lot of prestige, even though I hate myself on the inside because, I did something that I don't really want to do for the wrong reasons. So shoulds go here. Where do values go?
Bottom right.
Absolutely. So walk me through that.
You're gaining something because you're doing it because you value it, and it's also internal to yourself, as opposed to a hot dog.
Yeah, right. So like when I do things that I care about, I usually get something out of it. Right? So like if let's say that I care about my children, so I'm going to take care of them when they're sick. Actually, that may be a obligation. We'll get to that in a second. But generally speaking, things that you care about, in my experience, tend to come with some kind of gain. Like you get some sort of like personal satisfaction out of it. And like the reward that you gain is not something that is shown to the external world. There's no prestige with it. There may not necessarily be like bodily enjoyment with it. So like a good example of this is, let's say that I enjoy hiking and I climb to the top of a mountain. I'm not, it's like generally speaking, like, does it cost me something? Sure. Like it requires effort, right? So doing things that you care about sometimes require effort, but it like feels good on the inside, and you get to the top and there's like a view and like you feel kind of like amazing. So that's something like doing things that you care about. And so then our last bucket is duty, kind of goes up here. And so if we think about duty usually involves sacrifice, right? So it's like a loss. It's not something that necessarily like I want to do for my sake. It's an obligation or something that I owe. So it like costs me something, but it's very satisfying to do. So for example, taking care of my kids when they're sick, like overnight, is something that feels like internally satisfying as a parent, because like I know I'm being a good parent. It's not something that I'm posting on social media or anything that I'm going to like get prestige or enjoyment out of. And it actually costs me something, right? Because I have to stay up all night and like try to take care of them and all that kind of good stuff. So duty kind of goes up here. Does that make sense? So let me ask y'all, when people kind of come to you and they come up with goals and they say like, oh, I have these goals, what quadrant or quadrants do you think the average client that y'all deal with is operating from?
Shoulds or desires?
What do y'all think about that? Agree with, is that Alan?
Yeah, I would say shoulds.
Right? So we've got 2 votes for shoulds, 1 vote for desire. What about the rest of y'all? Yeah. Okay.
I think shoulds, because if someone had a desire, they would be able to do it without a coach.
Okay. So when you think about their lives and the behaviors that they engage in, what do you think actually drives them, and like what shapes their behavior? Eli. So not just the things.
Could you ask me the question again?
Yeah. So you said that they come to coaching and they have already satisfied their desires. What they need help with is the shoulds. Well, very well said. So I'm going to ask you to dig a little bit deeper. And for the things that like most of what they actually do, the behaviors that your clients engage in, what do you think is the driving force for what they're doing without you?
Gotcha. I'd say a lot of times desires, like if you take your corn dog example, most people don't need a coach to go buy a corn dog. They have enough motivation, if you will, by themselves to go do that.
Okay. And so like, I know this, so this is going to be kind of, actually, I forget the leading question. So well said. So I completely agree. So in my experience, most people operate from the left side of the quadrant. And operating from the left side of the quadrant can sometimes make people happy. But generally speaking, like what we're talking about is living a life of external reward. And then the other thing that tends to happen is like when you're living a life of external reward and it's kind of like loss oriented, like the loss of the should, if you're living a life of external reward, you can't like afford that loss. I don't know how else to put it. Right? So what I'd say is that when people actually move from this quadrant to this quadrant, or this quadrant to this quadrant, or this quadrant to this quadrant, this is when their motivation starts to move in a positive direction. They feel good about themselves and they take control of their lives. What do y'all think about that? That's a hypothesis or assertion that I'm putting forward, which y'all can agree or disagree with.
Definitely agree.
Right? So this is something that we also see in addiction psychiatry. So in addiction psychiatry, people have a powerful biological driver that is forcing them to use a substance, right? So biology doesn't even enter this, like this equation. When you have biology entering it, what we kind of go more towards is like, I'd say that biology is sort of maybe on desires, right? Because that's like reward circuitry and dopamine and stuff like that. So this also maybe is like where YouTube and gaming and stuff live. And so when it comes to helping someone overcome an addiction, like literally the process that we try to do, there's a whole system of therapy, called acceptance and commitment therapy, which is sort of based on, it's another one of these like novel therapies that takes a sprinkling of Eastern wisdom and then packages it up in a Western way and calls itself something new. Some interesting cultural appropriation going on there. So ACT is an evidence-based treatment for addictions. And what the goal of ACT is it sort of says that the more that you move people into this quadrant, the easier it is to overcome addictions. And that's been my experience as well. Like people have to have a clear reason to make the sacrifice, right? Like they have to make the sacrifice or give up the external reward. And there has to be something, I want you all to understand this, like anytime we're talking about motivation, right? There's a pro and a con. In someone's brain, there's a calculation that's going on constantly. Should I do this thing or should I not do this thing? Should I eat the hot dog or should I not eat the hot dog? And what keeps people stuck is essentially like a conflict between two of these quadrants. So I should do this, but I want to do this. And then we feel paralyzed. It's my duty to do this, but I want to do this, right? I want to do this, but this is what I care about. I actually do genuinely care about like being healthy. And I hate the way that I feel when I like drink too much. At the same time, I want to get absolutely hammered and go party and have fun with my friends. And so what keeps people stuck is actually like conflicts between these different quadrants. Does that make sense? So as a coach, what our goal is to help people essentially move from this side over here. And how do y'all think we do that? What's our methodology?
Create awareness and understanding of what's going on
Absolutely.
in their mind.
Absolutely. That's the key thing. Awareness and understanding. Okay? And that may sound kind of weird because like how does awareness and understanding like actually create, how does that drive behavior? Like once you clarify this stuff for people, like how does that help them?
Because when you can see like the driving forces behind these things, it's much easier to understand them and then shift around your own personal values for your choices.
Absolutely. Right. So I know it sounds kind of weird, but like, you know, like when our clients come in and they say like, oh, I have this goal and I should do it. So like, let's use the example of like the student who doesn't feel like studying, right? So like, what is the student who doesn't feel like studying? Like, what do they say to you? Like what language
I should
do they
study.
Absolutely. Right. And then you ask them what makes it hard. Like, why don't you study? And what do they say?
I don't want to.
There you go. There it is, right? It's that simple. So they're stuck right here. And so like the way that you help that client like is by sort of clarifying like their values, right? Like, so this is where, you know, when I work with clients who are like that, it's sort of thinking about, okay, like what do you actually care about? Why are you actually in college? You know, why did you go here? Is it to fulfill a societal obligation? Is that why you went to college? Or is there something genuinely that you can come to appreciate about college? Is there anything that we can figure out here that aligns with what you actually care about? Because if you can help that person uncover what about college aligns with them, and that could even be duty. You could even like come to the revelation, I've had students do this, who sort of say that like, okay, my parents have supported me, they're paying for my college. I owe them like some degree of like work, right? Because they're paying for me, so I should do this. And then it's not like a vague should, it actually, even though they use the word should, it crosses over into duty, and then we see a positive behavioral change. Once you align studying with their values, we see a positive behavioral change. Because then even if you're giving something up, even if there's a loss involved, if it kind of like, if you're giving something up, but you can make that class your own, like if you kind of say, okay, well, I'm in college, I'm studying finance, but I really care about philosophy. And what I'm going to do is like minor in philosophy. And you sort of help them sort of uncover, you know, some plan to help them act in a way that's aligned with their values, and you'll see positive behavioral change. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes.
So the second thing, so the key takeaway here is that, you know, as a coach, what you want to do is clarify like what is driving this person, clarify their intent. And as you clarify their intent, you can start to ask them questions that sort of help them understand like what is on this side of the equation and how do we get from like this side of the equation to this side of the equation. How do we get, and what's the conflict that they face? And the cool thing about human beings is once you bring a subconscious conflict to the surface in a conscious manner, it tends to move towards the right direction. Okay? So those are the 4 types of intent. Any questions before we move on? Okay. So the next thing that we're going to do is talk about raising the awareness of negative. So this is a big problem that a lot of people who set goals and like have intent, these kind of intent problems have, which is that they don't really appreciate the negative. So when someone talks about a goal, like, and they say like, okay, my goal is to study every day. Like what kind of, is that like a positive thing in their mind or a negative thing in their mind? When people think about like meeting their goals, so what is like the emotional energy behind that? What's the valence there?
Some part of it is like resentment toward the situation they're in.
Ah, okay.
Red.
Good. Is that conscious or unconscious? What do y'all think?
I would say unconscious.
Yeah, I mean, they may be somewhat conscious of it, but for the most part, it's unconscious, right? So when I think about losing weight, is that idea filled with resentment or what? Right? When I think about getting a 4.0 GPA, like, is the primary emotion that I feel when I think about that resentment? What's the primary emotion that people feel when they kind of think about fulfilling their goals?
Some kind of excitement.
Yeah, so it's positive in nature, right? So it's like exciting, achievement, pride. Right? So this is interesting. So like when someone is kind of thinking about their goals in a very positive manner, I'm going to post it on social media. Like I'm going to advertise, I'm going to get into Harvard and I'm going to like buy a Harvard hoodie and a Harvard hat and then a Harvard bumper sticker. And then everyone's going to know I went to Harvard. It's going to be great. So what happens when they sort of have all of these like positive like expectations or ideas of achieving their goals and they set out to actually like achieve their goals?
Doesn't usually work sustainably.
Why not?
Because part of their brain is sort of thought that they've already done it, and so there's less motivation to do it. And part of it is that whenever there's like an implicit judgment about what you're doing, it's like putting white gas in your car. Like it'll kind of get you going for a little while, like you can do almost anything for a week or two, and then it's just not going to work all that well.
Okay, excellent. Someone's been watching Dr. K's guide, I think.
Their motivation
Yeah,
is
it's
hinged. Oh, sorry, Alan.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, it's pretty good. Have you seen it?
Steve?
I was going to say their motivation is hinged on the outcome, not on their action.
Right? So when people think about goals in a positive way, which is like sort of how we defaultly think about them. It's like, it's a weird sentence to say because like, of course we want to achieve our goals. Like, why do we want to achieve our goals? Because of like something positive, duh. That's why they're my goals to begin with. But it's interesting because what actually happens is we create an expectation. So let's say like, I think about how awesome it's going to be when I get into shape. It's going to be great. I create this expectation of how like, I'm going to be a Chad and I'm going to go to the beach and like, it's going to be like Chad City up in here. And then I go to the gym. And what's my experience in the gym?
It's hard.
Yep. Right. I'm huffing, I'm puffing, there's shame. And after
There's
one
people there
week,
who are in shape and you're not.
oh, there you go. Right. And after 1 week, I look at my flabby ass in the mirror and what do I see? Am I Dr. Chad Thundercock now? Has the
Not
action
yet.
that I've taken, what is the correlation between the action that I've taken and the expectation that I have?
It's fallen way short.
Absolutely. And then what does that do to my motivation?
Decrease.
Absolutely. Right? So this is the big thing. Like when people come in and they're like, I'm fired up, like I'm gonna achieve this goal. I'm gonna make my life what I want it to be. You know? I'm gonna crush it. I'm gonna make $1 million. I'm gonna get into shape. I'm gonna it's gonna be awesome. Like I'm gonna do so good. I'm gonna become a pro League of Legends player. It's gonna be awesome. And so it's kind of weird, but one of the key things we can do as a coach is raise awareness of the negative. So there are a couple of important things there. The first thing that we do when we raise awareness of the negative is we fix this expectation issue, because we set appropriate expectations. And the problem is that when they set inappropriate expectations and they go out and they do something, and what happens doesn't align with their expectations, it tanks their motivation. And then they quit. Right? And then they feel ashamed of themselves. And then they get the identity of a quitter. GG. Get wrecked, noobs. Game over. Right? So this cycle happens so fast, and it starts with here. Okay? Or it doesn't, identity of the quitter sounds harsh, so they're all these milder versions of this, right? They're oh, I'm not good at that. I'm good at being a programmer, but I'm not good at actually making video games. There are things that we've spent a decade training in, and so we'll see this a lot in our community as well, where they're there are people who are doing pretty well in life, but when it comes to doing things that they find that they value, so there are a lot of people that can actually do the should column really well. We'll get these people too. And when you talk to them that they feel unhappy, and you talk to them about, what about the things that you value, there'll be some kind of identity thing there, right? They'll feel okay, I'm not quite as talented as other musicians. Or they'll say things I've already invested so much into this career that I would feel behind if I switched now, or it's too late, right? And if they start saying things like that, what is that? What part of the mind is that coming from? If they say, I'm behind other musicians because I've spent 10 years as a programmer.
That's the ego.
Ego, absolutely, right? So it doesn't have to look like, a quit, shamed, neat kind of person, right? This cycle manifests in people who are very healthy and very successful. It's just the way that the mind works. So the first thing that we're going to do by raising awareness of the negative is that we're going to deal with the idea of expectation. And as your clients learn how to expect appropriate things from their actions, it'll actually disable this cycle, and they'll be able to retain motivation. The second thing that raising awareness of the negative does is, let me think about what number 2 is. Has to do with ambivalence. Okay? So can somebody define ambivalence for me again?
It's you're sitting on the fence.
Absolutely, right? So on the fence. So if we kind of go back, if we go back to this, these conflicts are ambivalence. Y'all see that? This is ambivalence right here. So anytime that humans have a desire to do something, or I'm using the word desire loosely here. Anytime that a human wants to do something, if they don't do it, there's something that's getting in the way. And so the other thing that happens with our clients is they think about, what they want to accomplish, but they don't really appreciate what keeps them from accomplishing it. So this is kind of weird, but a lot of people in the digital generation, they say that they lack motivation. They don't lack motivation. They actually have a ton of motivation. And I want you guys to think about this. This is going to sound kind of weird. If I wake up and let's say I'm a video game addict, right? And I play video games all day long, and my life is falling apart, and I describe myself as unmotivated, what do y'all think about that? Am I unmotivated?
No.
Why do you say no, David?
You're just really motivated to play video games.
Absolutely, right? So I want you guys to really appreciate this. If playing video games is destroying every dimension of my life, it's screwing up my relationships, it's screwing up my health, it's screwing up my professional prospects, it's screwing up my grades. For that high of a cost, I want y'all to recognize that there must be a pro on the other side of that equation in order to continue that behavior. And this is the thing that no one thinks about being a video game addict is a huge pro in their mind. But it absolutely is, because that's just literally how the brain works. Human beings do not engage in, like, generally speaking, negative things. We default to things that on balance benefit us. That's how we've evolved. So how do I know, like, how far to hunt or what kind of territory to have? It's because on balance, the pros outweigh the cons. And that's just how evolution works. So by raising awareness of the negative, we're sort of highlighting costs. Sorry, I said highly. But... So we highlight costs, and then we kind of like help people understand like what is on the other side of the equation. Because the other problem with people who are unmotivated is they just don't understand it, right? They're like, I don't know. Every part of my life is falling apart because I'm addicted to video games. I just don't know why I can't do something about it. There's a huge blind spot in their mind. And the blind spot is actually highlighting the costs. Or in a weird way, for a negative behavior, it's highlighting the benefit. So in either case, it's about both sides of the fence, okay? So the advantage of sort of highlighting the negative, or in some sense the pro, like the reason I'm talking about the negative is when I think about, okay, I want to become a doctor and that's the goal that I have, there's like a negative to that. There's a huge cost to that, which is why I'm not doing it. That's why I'm not engaging in the behavior. Does that make sense? So it can be positive or negative, but we're basically talking about the flip side of the coin. And the cool thing about that is, once again, we have evidence-based motivational interviewing. And once you highlight the negative and you raise that ambivalence and you start working with them using the stages of change model, that's when you start to see positive change. But that has to start with awareness of the negative and working on that ambivalence. Until you can't move someone past ambivalence, you can't move someone past an internal conflict if they don't know what the internal conflict is. And eventually what you want to get to is to the point where your client is making a choice. And once they understand that they're making a choice every single day, I have a choice today to play League of Legends or take one insignificant step towards the life that I want to. Which one am I going to pick? And once they understand that it's going to be an insignificant step, it's going to feel insignificant, they're going to study today, but it's not going to give them a 4.0, that they'll never get a 4.0, but who do I want to be? Do I want to live a life that is in service to my values, filled with external rewards? Or do I want to live a life that is in service to what I care about and is going to lead to internal reward? Once that choice becomes clear in their mind, which you're going to help them do, and we'll explain a little bit about the neuroscience of how that works, then they start making choices in the right direction, right? And also from motivational interviewing, we know from numerous scientific studies that this methodology is actually effective at creating a behavioral change in the right direction. Okay? So working on ambivalence. Okay. And then we get to the third advantage of raising the awareness of the negative, which is that, this is kind of weird, but paradoxically, so this is going to sound kind of weird. I may have kind of spoiled y'all already. But once the cost of a behavior increases in my mind, what does that actually do to my ability or my likelihood to engage in the behavior?
It lowers it.
So that's what one would think. But paradoxically, increasing cost can sometimes drive behavior. Okay? And that may sound really weird because it is. So this is where, like, we're not really sure how this works. We just know multiple instances of, like, human behavior where this is the case. So the first example actually comes from wine tasting. Okay? So people have done studies on wine tasting, and, like, what do y'all think? So if I blind a group of people, like, let's say expert sommeliers, which are like professional wine tasters, and I blind them to a wine, let's say I give them 5 bottles of wine that have various costs. What do you think happens? Do you think the sommeliers can tell which wine is like, do you think they can tell that the more expensive wine actually tastes better?
No.
So it's interesting because you're correct. So, like, people, like, the interesting thing about sommeliers is they'll agree, there'll be consensus about which wines are better than others. So they can rank the wines from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but there'll be, like, no correlation with dollar signs. Now, they do a second experiment where they tell them they're not blinded to price. What do you think happens when wine tasters are not blinded to price in terms of how they rate wines?
The more expensive ones taste better.
Absolutely. So the price drives the perception of quality. Okay? So this is like, so there have been scientific studies on this. And so like corporations use this all the time in terms of like, you know, they'll use it for sales, for example. So when I say that, oh, this car costs $100,000, but you can get it on sale for like $40,000. There's this perception of value that like is created by the cost that you pay. It's kind of bizarre. The other good example of this is there have been a lot of studies on hazing. And what effect does hazing have on someone's like value of the group they're being hazed to join? Like if I have to get hazed to join a frat, what happens to my perception of the value of the frat?
It goes up.
Absolutely. Increases value. And if we think about it, like if I tell you, like I'm going to tell you, hey, if you want to join this frat, it's going to fucking suck. We're going to tie you up naked. Seriously happened at the university I went to when I was a freshman. Like there was one fraternity that would tie up their pledges naked on a tree. They'd like tie them up onto trees. And then the people in the frat would piss on them. Make you naked, I'm going to piss on you. And it's going to be awful. What do y'all think? Like, how many people do you think dropped out of hazing, like, after the pledge process, after being demeaned and paying this huge, humiliating cost? Not my frat, by the way. But
I'll say, like, none.
Absolutely. So I know it's weird, okay? Like, I don't understand exactly why this happens, but as coaches, like, we sort of don't care, right? So what we're going to do as coaches is we're going to use psychology and neuroscience to help our clients get to where they need to go. And like, we're not saying we're going to haze them or anything like that, right? We don't want to do that. We're going to be like authentic and compassionate. But what we can learn is that paradoxically high front-loaded costs can actually incentivize behavior. And what we see this time and time and time again, right? If you tell your client, hey, like, what do you think going to the gym is like? They're going to be like, oh, I think it's going to be tough. And you guys raise awareness of the negative. You're going to be like, it may be really hard. You may feel ashamed. Okay, what's going to happen? Like, let's think about it. How are we going to deal with that shame? Where does that shame come from? Like, how are you going to feel? And then what do they say when you actually like get them to go if you've prepped them about the negative costs? What do they say when they come back?
It wasn't that bad.
Absolutely. So here's the key thing, all right? What does this statement do to their motivation? How does this statement affect whether they go tomorrow or not?
It increases.
Abso-fucking-lutely. Right? So this is why we want to raise awareness of the negative. There are actually multiple mechanisms that are really important about raising awareness of the negative. The first is that we deal with their expectations. We set appropriate expectations. The second is that by elevating the cost, so I don't know if y'all have this, or if y'all have ever seen this, but like we see examples of this all the time. So another good example is like, you know, parents who are like living vicariously through their children. So they've given up so much for their child. And so the value of that sacrifice like increases in their mind and like drives all kinds of sometimes negative behaviors. You can see this in like narcissistic parents too, where they've like paid a big cost. So it must mean that like there's big value to what I've done. If I quit my job and I gave up my career to raise you, that means that I must have done a very good job. Does that make sense? Like they can't tolerate the idea. There's a bunch of cognitive dissonance, which is probably the mechanism here, by the way, is like cognitive dissonance, is that we're sort of leveraging cognitive dissonance in a positive way to like get people aligned to move in the direction that they want to go. And in the case of like narcissistic parents, it's kind of the other way around, where like to prevent that cognitive dissonance, like it feels dumb to like pay a cost and not get value out of it. So as you sort of raise awareness of the cost, you can actually drive positive behavior. Okay? And then the third thing is ambivalence and sort of working through that ambivalence, which sort of drives people in the right direction. Questions about, you know, how to clarify intent or the value of raising awareness of the negative?
Yeah, I don't fully understand how the last part, the paradoxical thing, might work in a session. So I guess my understanding is, okay, so we're going to raise a lot of awareness of the negatives, which increases the cost. And therefore, when they actually try it, then it drives the behavior more. Is that what it is?
Yeah. So in session, I think the main thing, like, so the questions that you want to ask is like, for a given goal, like, what's it going to cost you? Right? Like, that's the question you want to ask. Like, what do you have to give up by doing this? So if the goal is to get me to stop playing like a game all day, what do I give up? What do I lose by not playing the game? Because that's not something most people think about. What most people just think about is like, what do I gain by quitting gaming? And so then what happens is like they're not aware that there's like, and then it's kind of silly because like when they try to give up gaming, so let's say that the advantages of gaming is that, like, let's just take this example, okay? So for gaming, what are the advantages if I play video games all day? Like, what do I get from that?
Emotional suppression,
Absolutely.
fun,
Distraction.
socialization.
Yep. Socialization. Dopamine. Get some of that sweet, sweet dopamine or fun, right? So, and everyone, what people tend to look at is like the advantages of achieving a goal. So they think like, oh my God, like I'm going to get money and I'm going to, get healthy and I'm going to become independent and I'm going to be confident, right? This is what they're focusing on. And then when they try to do it, like they're not prepared for like this. So like they're not prepared for the shame. They're not prepared for the loneliness. And they're not prepared for the boredom. And so if they're not like ready for this, like what's going to happen when they stop playing games for a day? Like this is going to hit. And then like their brain is like, this feels bad. Why the hell are we doing this? Let's go back to the gaming. Like, which one do you think your brain is going to pick? I give you a choice, red pill, blue pill. One involves having fun and having friends, and one involves shame, loneliness, and boredom. Which one are you going to pick? So you have to help people understand that there's a cost. And oddly enough, like, the more that you emphasize cost, so let me ask y'all, like, when you emphasize cost, like, which way are you moving in this quadrant?
To the
Away
right.
from desires.
Away from desires, sure. So I'd say that, like, if we think about cost, right, cost is up here. So, like, this is how you move people in this direction. And then what you do is you help people like, okay, what do you care about as you clarify that? So this is how you get away from desires. Absolutely. And then you're in the shoulds. And then like, there are other techniques that you can use to move people to the right. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question, Tom?
I think so. So we're trying to highlight the cost, that it's going to cost a lot in terms of shame, loneliness, boredom. And then for some reason, paradoxically, that actually drives behavior.
Yeah. So like, we don't want to overemphasize it because chances are they're blind to it. So we want to raise some awareness of it. And then what happens is like, once they know what to expect, right, then we're engaging this circuit, whatever the hell this is. Because then when they try and you say, hey, like, I think this next week, so if you want to quit gaming, I'm behind you 100%. I think it's going to be tough. I know you can do it, bro, but it ain't going to be easy. Right? Does that make sense in terms of a coach? Like, as a coach, like how that will help someone move in the right direction?
Yeah, that definitely helps to clarify.
Right? So like, it's like, hey, bro, this ain't going to be easy. But like, this is what it could look like. So I want you to be prepared. And then you can also engage a lot of other like super practical stuff. Since it's going to be so hard, I know you want to stop gaming for a week, but like you may just last 1 or 2 days at a time. How are you going to feel if you fail after 1 or 2 days? And let's remember that this can take practice, right? So then you're going to prep them from failure. You're going to do all that kind of good stuff. And then when they come in, they say, okay, I was only able to make it 3 days. And then you can say, hold on a second. On your first attempt, you didn't meet your goal of 1 week, but you actually went 72 hours without playing a single video game? That's amazing. And you view that as a failure? And you went 72 hours? Like, I can see that you didn't meet your goal, but on the flip side, like, if you did it for 1 day, if you did it for 2 days, and you did it for 3 days, Like, you could probably do it for 3 days again. Let's figure out how you can do it for 3 days again. You adjust their goal. We'll kind of get to that in a second. But that's the iterative aspect, right? So it all kind of ties together in a practical sense. We've got a list of questions and exercises, by the way, and like even dialogue, sample dialogue for y'all that we'll give y'all in the manual. Okay? That'll clarify a lot of these things. Okay, so now we get to the fun part. Presuming this hasn't been fun already. Okay, so now what we're going to do is talk about how awareness changes people. So here we are saying, oh, just like have conversations about their shoulds and their values and their desires, and have conversations about this and make them aware of the costs. So then the question becomes like, how does that from a neuroscience perspective actually result in like changes in their behavior? And this gets really fascinating. So have y'all seen the Vidya versus Jnana video in Dr. K's guide? And can anyone kind of explain like a TLDR of like what the takeaway from that guide is?
I think if I remember correctly, Vidya is knowledge and Jnana is understanding. So it's like objective knowledge and subjective understanding and the differences between the two.
Yep. So it's information. It's objective. And then Jnana is understanding. And it's subjective. So which one do you think is more responsible for behavioral change?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right? So this is, once again, the problem of the internet, which is that we have tons of information out there about how to fix your life, right? Available to you for the low price of $300 if you sign up now. But everyone watches these things and like it doesn't actually change their behavior. And there's tons of information from like medical science that information does not change behavior, right? So if I have someone who's like smoking and I say, hey, if you smoke, you're going to get lung cancer. Do you want lung cancer? They say no. Do they quit smoking?
No. Okay.
Right? So then the question becomes, how does awareness go from here to here? Like, so this is essentially what we're going to do. What we focus on in coaching is not giving them information. We focus on giving them understanding. So how does that process work? So it starts by understanding two things. One is that there's explicit memory and there's implicit memory. Okay? And then there's working memory. We're going to kind of gloss over working memory for a second. So explicit memory is information, facts, and memories. Does this make sense? So like if I ask you, what your name is, or what was the address, like what city did you grow up in? That's like explicit memory. It's stored in a particular part of the brain, like the hippocampus. Okay? And then implicit memory is understanding. So let me give you all an example. And it's stored in other parts of the brain. So let's say I want to learn how to play basketball. So if I want to learn how to play basketball, I go and I watch YouTube videos on basketball. I go and I read books about I watch the Michael Jordan documentary. I learn all these facts about basketball. I study like the physics of the body and I learn all these tips, right? So people say that when you're shooting, you should, when you're shooting hoops, you should follow through. Have y'all heard that before in terms of basketball? So I know all the tips. What happens when I go and play basketball? I have all the information.
I'm really inexperienced and not good at making the basket.
Absolutely, right? So it doesn't actually translate into like workable information, right? So what happens in the brain is we have these we have these tips. And the cool thing is that we can turn this tip of follow through into understanding. But then where that lives is actually the cerebellum for basketball. So what happens is explicit memories are stored in the hippocampus. But then what happens is that as we catalyze understanding, that information moves from the hippocampus to other parts of our brain. And specifically for us, it moves to the frontal lobe or the neocortex. Okay? So I can read about motivation. There are people here who are listening to this on stream right now, and they can understand the concepts theoretically, and I can even quiz them, right? Like the next day I can ask chat, what did y'all remember about what I said? But that's all explicit memory, and it lives in the hippocampus, and they can recall it, but it's not actually going to change their lives. In order to change their lives, there's actually a very, in a sense, well-known process where explicit memories from the hippocampus essentially get encoded in other parts of our brain, in the cerebellum, in the frontal lobes, and in parts of our cortices. And once they get encoded there, then they actually affect our behavior, okay? So I'll give you all an example. Like once it clicks for me that I need to follow through when I'm shooting hoops, then my body like kind of responds. But the way that it clicks is how? Like how do I get information to click with shooting hoops? How do I learn how to like shoot effectively in basketball?
Through experience. And
Absolutely.
practice.
I gotta
missing a whole bunch of times.
Play it. Play on the court, right? So I gotta get on the court. Okay? So now, and this sort of makes sense, right? Like once I play on the court, like once I practice, once I get out there, once I start fluidly applying the concepts, swimming around in the concepts, I don't quite understand it, right? So like a lot of being on the court is about being at the barrier of your understanding. So let me ask y'all, what is the mental equivalent of playing on the court? How do we do that? How do we get in there and actually start shooting hoops when it comes to mental concepts like desires and
studying for just 30 minutes or whatever the applicable goal would be?
Nope, incorrect. Studying is explicit information.
Oh, sorry. I meant studying in the sense of like if your goal is like to get a 4.0, but the small insignificant step is studying, then you take that small insignificant step.
Okay, so, but I can't take that small insignificant step, right, Steve? Like that's my whole problem is I can't study. So what's the equivalent? I know it's sort of like a read my mind question, but I'm going to stick to this one. What's the equivalent of playing on the court when it comes to like these mental internal processes? Picking up the ball and shooting hoops. See if chat can get it. It's not doing it. Okay. So I know this is, I love these answers. This is it. This is literally what we do. Right? So like, here's the thing. There's all this theoretical crap floating around in their head. Getting them to play with it, getting them to understand. I know you guys know this, right? This is literally what you do. You get on the court of the mind and you help people like understand these concepts. They play around with them. You test it this way, you test it that way, you talk about it, you have revelations, you have emotional catharsis. They're starting to play with these concepts and you're bringing it out with them. That's literally what coaching is. So that's why we do coaching in the way that we do it. So like as someone, you can explain this stuff to people, but as y'all work with them, as you talk about these concepts move from information to understanding. They start to move into your frontal lobes and like your neocortex and like other parts of your brain. And then they start to actually affect your behavior. So this is also why, as we look at some of the format of coaching, why do we coach people 1 hour a week over 8 weeks as opposed to 8 hours in one day? What do y'all think that is?
We want them to do the work.
Sure.
You need practice over time?
Absolutely. So this mechanism, when does this happen? Do y'all know? This process right here. It happens at a very specific time. When does explicit memory get encoded as implicit memory? When does
information? You're sleeping?
Absolutely. During sleep. Okay, so theoretically, and we've tried this, okay, so we've had coaches who will work with clients twice a week. This is also why we actually, like, generally speaking, keep sessions to an hour, because remember, you have this working memory, and so your working memory gets overwritten after 45 minutes. So like a lot of times clients will want like 90-minute sessions or 2-hour sessions because it feels good. But what we really want is we don't want them to lose the first 45 minutes and the next 45 minutes. So a lot of the way that we've structured our intervention is it has some of these concepts baked in, that change happens over time. Like, sure, we sort of generically know that, but hippocampus consolidation into long-term memory and application into your cerebellum happens during sleep. So if you want to study effectively, for example, like when I was studying in medical school, part of the reason I was effective is because I tried to take a nap every day. Because studying for 4 hours at a stretch is not as effective as studying for 2 hours, taking a nap, and studying for 2 hours. You give your brain time to consolidate that memory and turn it into understanding. Questions about this? Okay, right on time. Finished on time. All right, so let's go ahead and just summarize this quickly. So like if we think about basketball, right? It's essentially practice. And so what is practice for the mind? Like that's what we try to do in coaching. So this is where like as you understand these concepts, as you play with these concepts, as you work with clients over time and you kind of reinforce them, what'll happen is like these concepts will start to be internalized by your clients and then they'll start to affect their behavior. Because then at that point, it's working from the frontal lobe. Like, I don't know if this sort of makes sense, but if you look at motivation and you think about a should, so like when I ignore the shoulds, those shoulds are coming from explicit memory. It's like I'm sitting down, I'm about to play League of Legends first thing in the morning, which is like 11 a.m. for me. And then this thought pops up, this fact pops up in my head. I have a thought that gets generated from explicit memory that says, hey, you should not do this. But it does not actually drive my behavior. When you look at people who make behavioral changes, the thought comes from a different place. It doesn't just pop up as a fact or a bit of information that then quickly gets ignored. It comes from a completely different place of their brain. And when it comes from the frontal lobe, then it actually results in things like impulse control. It's not a fact that is coming from their hippocampus. It's an actual understanding that results in impulse control from the frontal lobe. Does that make sense to y'all, or is that like a bit too abstract? Do y'all know what I mean? Like if you examine your own thought process, you'll recognize like, you have some good behaviors. And if you pay attention to where those good behaviors come from or where change comes from in your mind, it's not actually a fact. It's something that's coming from a different part of your brain. It's something that reins in an impulse and drives your behavior. And that's what the frontal lobe does. As long as it's coming from the hippocampus, as long as it's a piece of information, as long as it's vidya, as long as it's me telling you or your parents telling you this is bad for you, you should stop doing it, it will not change behavior. It'll just be explicit memory. This is also why parents can tell you 1,000 times to do something, but as long as it's floating around, you can remember that they told you to do that, but as long as it's coming from your hippocampus and explicit memory, it's not going to drive behavioral change. And so the mechanism for moving from explicit memory to implicit memory is literally how we have designed this coaching intervention. This is the goal. And that's why we kind of say awareness first, raise awareness, raise awareness, raise awareness. Because raising awareness is the process that gets you from here to here. They have to like get it, right? They have to understand it. They have to be aware of it. And by the way, awareness is also what strengthens the frontal lobe. So awareness comes from the frontal lobe as well. So from a neuroscience perspective, it's like boosting the frontal lobe. Okay? Questions?
Yeah. Is there a way to get this whole thing that you've drawn up just to, like, I know it's chicken scratch, but it'd be nice to just have as a reference.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to do way more than that. So, there's this, and then there's also like about 8,000 words of like manual, right? So we'll send that your way. And it's also going to have exercises and like dialogue options and things like that for your clients. Y'all can, I don't think Hannah's here today, but Hannah will scramble to put it together when I procrastinate for a while to get it to her. But I have gotten her part 1 of it already. So hopefully she's working on it. So yes, we will give you like actual like questions to ask. Like we'll give you a playbook. Like what are the questions that will help people, figure out what their values are? What are the questions that will help people catalyze their desires or like understand what their duty is? What are the ways that you can raise awareness of negativity? And a lot of this stuff y'all already know, right? So like y'all know how to deal with ambivalence. Yes, is the short answer. Other questions? So one last mechanism that I'll share with y'all. How do y'all feel about this training and how much it will help you? Be honest.
I feel actually good. There was a moment of understanding I had when you were explaining the wants and shoulds and then focusing on the values, sort of identifying the conflict there. So that was really cool. And then it just gives me a bit more structure as to how to approach coaching. So I mean, maybe my frontal lobe is just really active right now. I'm not sure, but I felt like it was helpful to be here today and get this presentation. So thanks.
Sure. Anyone else have thoughts?
It's going to take practice.
Yep, it certainly will. Ah, interesting, Kent. Are you implying that there's going to be a cost to it?
Yes, with experimenting a lot of things, trial and error, and then see, hopefully, I mean, the same way how I got to where I am and now coaching, that like it's going to take a lot of experimenting.
Yep. And so when you have the expectation that's going to take a lot of experimenting and you get through that experimentation, what is going to be your confidence level as a coach? If the cost to learning it is high, how are you going to feel about it afterward?
I'm trying not to curse. It's going to feel sucky. And so like when you're kind of like going through the point of like experiment with things don't work out, and your level as a coach potentially, it's like, oh, this sucks, and like you're trying to go through the motions of it, but then like as you continue going through over and over of like trial and error through a lot of clients and like working with them, and somehow it like works, and you're like, oh, let's see what happened there. And then you work with other coaches, like talk with them what kind of like techniques they use and whatnot, and your confidence level kind of goes up by the end potentially.
Yeah. And as your confidence level goes up at the end, what impact does that have for the outcomes of your clients? How does your confidence as a coach affect the outcomes of your clients? Do y'all know? It's kind of interesting. So it has a strong positive correlation. So if y'all went to the group curriculum, if y'all were there, we talked about Irvin Yalom's, like what he discovered about what makes effective groups in terms of outcomes. One is having a cognitive framework that you're confident in as a coach. So y'all are right that I'm sending a lot of stuff your way. So the other thing that I want to point out is that this is not too much about technique. Like, I think you guys actually have the techniques. This is about your internal understanding. And as your internal understanding and as your cognitive framework improves, it will lead to better outcomes for your clients. There's also another level that we're doing is like, there's a reason we're streaming this. So if someone is watching this and signs up for coaching, how do you think that will affect their outcomes compared to someone who didn't watch this and sign up for coaching?
It'll probably improve them.
Why?
They'll have a much greater understanding going in, both of the coaching process and the amount of work that they will be doing and what to expect from their coach.
Are there any scenarios in which a client watching this may actually lead to worse outcomes?
Yeah, if they have an expectation that coaching is going to do a lot for them from watching this, then they might be like, hey, wait, what the hell? I was expecting this and didn't get it. So now I'm just going to quit coaching.
Absolutely. Beautiful, right? So both of y'all are correct. So this is kind of interesting. Faith in the model, placebo, actually improves outcomes. So faith in the model from a provider perspective improves outcomes. Faith in the model, if a client is watching this and is like, oh, hype, I think this can really help me, and they sign up for coaching with the idea that if they have faith in this process and they say, oh, I really think this can help me, it'll actually help them. And the cool thing is, if I highlight this to everyone watching, what impact do you think that has on the placebo effect?
Doesn't sound logical, but I'm assuming it increases it.
Actually has no impact whatsoever. Fascinating guy. There's a guy named Ted Kapchuk at Harvard Medical School. Did some amazing research on placebo. So he's a Chinese medical doctor and started giving people sham treatment. And he was like, I'm going to give you treatment that doesn't work. But we know from studies that if you believe in it and I believe in it, it'll actually help you. And I really do believe it'll help you, even though it doesn't do anything. And then he gives them the treatment, and they get better. It's amazing. So raising awareness of the placebo effect doesn't appear to diminish its results. As long as you tell people that I think this is going to work anyway. Right? So like raising awareness of this is going to be interesting because if y'all have faith in it, so we want you to feel a little bit uncomfortable. That's what we do here. You guys haven't gotten used to it yet. Looking at you, Brian, I think you win the prize for being the most uncomfortable of all coaches in the history of coaching. So if you, so we want, it's a lot, but I think y'all are ready for it. Y'all have been doing this for a while now. So we've taught y'all the techniques already. So now it's about, this is all in your back end. It doesn't have to change too much about what you say or how you work with a client. It's going to help you conceptualize your clients in like a better way. It's going to help you guide them in a better way. But for the bread and butter, like it's not, this is the last analogy I'll give you. Do y'all play MOBAs? Okay.
Yeah.
So in a MOBA, there's like the skills that you train, right? Like I can train last hitting. I can train like hitting my buttons properly. I can increase my knowledge of the game and know what different heroes or champions do. That's the bread and butter of the game. Have y'all heard of this concept map pressure? What is map pressure?
Well, like oh, go ahead.
You go, Ryan.
Oh, I was gonna say with Dota, when you want to do like map pressure, like once you take an objective, you want to like pressure certain sections of the map so like the enemy can't like farm it, and then you could like pretty much control where the other team has to play.
So if I understand map pressure, will it improve my ability to win a game of Dota?
Yes.
What is the skill I can practice to increase map pressure? Is it like last hitting? Is
By
it like
raising
knowledge
awareness to the map?
No, but how do I practice it, right? So like there's like, what do I click in a game of Dota? What buttons do I push to do
Just
map
like
pressure?
playing a lot of games and understanding the game and understanding the meta.
You guys keep on talking about understanding. What I'm wondering is like I know how to like you can tell me how to last hit better, right? You can like say like, okay, look at these different guides, like fine. I want to know like how do I practice map pressure? Like what buttons do I push? Do I hit Q or W or right click or left click? Like
There is no button for map pressure.
so, same for y'all. What we're talking, you guys already know the buttons. The buttons are the same. We'll give you a little bit in terms of like, you can try asking this question, you can try asking this question. This series on goal setting and motivation is not so much on technique. We'll get to technique on day 3 or day 4. But today and tomorrow are not about technique, they're about map pressure. They're about understanding like what's going on in the client. And once y'all understand these things for your clients, the skills that you already have, you'll be able to apply in a much more efficient way. Right? So in Dota, it's like farming jungle versus farming lane. Like those are both like high level concepts that inform your overall level of play. So as coaches, like today is not about, hey, ask this question at this time. It's for you to understand this high level concept that will elevate your coaching to the next level and really help your client. Does that make sense? So just play with it, right? So like try it with different clients. Don't worry, you're not going to screw anything up. present in case reviews, whatever. Like, try these different things. And as you clarify these concepts, like the change is going to happen on its own. Like you guys have already been doing this with clients. Y'all have already been catalyzing information and understanding. You've already been doing this because you meet them once a week. They go to sleep. Their hippocampus consolidates information and transmits it to their neocortex. Like all this stuff is already going on. Y'all are already doing it. This is really to give you the cognitive framework because based on the science, we know that giving y'all a very solid cognitive framework and using concepts like map pressure will actually improve your coaching performance, which is why we're doing this training. But practically, it doesn't have to change much. Okay? Questions? Okay. So we're going to go ahead and let y'all go if you want to. I'm going to ask questions to chat for a little bit. If y'all want to hang around, you can. But y'all really don't have to. So I'll just stay on the call. And if everyone drops out, that's totally fine. And if not, I may send questions your way from chat. Okay? So thank you all very much. We'll pick up tomorrow with resistance. All right? Okay, chat, questions. I just saw there was an auto ban or auto held message for thanks trainees, and the bot was saying that was misogynistic. The word trainee was misogynistic or something. Okay. So here's a good one. How do you deal with skeptical clients who don't believe in the process?
You would kind of have to explore what their definition of skepticism is.
Okay. What does that mean? How would you do that? What's a question you would ask?
What makes you skeptical?
Perfect. Right? And what's the goal there, Ken?
To sort of get a deeper understanding and dig into the ambiguity they kind of provide to us, to sort of meet them where they're at and look at their perspective.
Absolutely, right? So the way that you overcome skepticism is by understanding where it comes from. They may have a damn good reason to be skeptical. They probably do. And so the better you understand that, the better you'll understand them and the better you'll be able to help them. So this is something that we see a lot. So I recently had a conversation with the family member of a patient of mine who didn't want to get a vaccine. And so when I talk to them, it's it starts out by sort of asking, help me understand why you're skeptical of the vaccine. And as we kind of go through those kinds of things, what's your hesitation? What's your resistance? It's all dealing with resistance, right? So you just explore it and roll with it. You're not there to convince them that you're right. You're there to understand why, what you're offering may be wrong. Okay, so here's a good one. Why am I afraid to set goals? What do y'all think?
I mean, I think that's just an extrapolation of being afraid of failure.
Help us understand that, Steve.
So my guess would be being afraid to set a goal is more based on the idea that if I set one, I either have to do it or I fail or I guilt or shame myself over not doing it at all.
So what I'm hearing is that if I set a goal, I can fail. But as long as I don't set goals, I can't fail.
Yeah.
Easy. GG. Not setting goals is OP. Never have to fail. 100% win rate if I never play a game. Owned, noobs. Right? So in a more practical sense, how would y'all approach a client who comes in and says, why do I can't set goals for myself? What would you say to them?
What feels bad about setting a goal?
Right? So explore it with them. What makes it hard for you to set a goal? What do you think? Why do you think you need to set goals? Why is it a problem that you can't set goals? And so when I ask a question, why is it a problem that you can't set goals? What I'm doing there is moving from the should quadrant to which quadrant?
Potentially the value quadrant.
Absolutely, right? Y'all see that? Like, that's a question that moves you from one quadrant to the other. I should set goals. Well, what's the actual problem? Like, that's when you get to what they care about. And as you ask questions like that, you're going to actually move them from the should quadrant, which is paralyzing. Can we all agree should quadrant is like paralyzing? And well, we'll get to that in a little bit tomorrow too, where sometimes the should quadrant, a lot of people operate from the should quadrant. But then by asking goals like that, you'll move them to the values quadrant. And then as we talk about what you care about, it'll be like easier to set goals that are aligned with what you care about. When you set goals that are aligned and resonate with you as a person, you're more likely to succeed. Okay, so here's a good one. What if your issue is not a lack of awareness and you are still having trouble using that awareness to implement action? Oh, I hope you guys get this one right. It implies that there is a right, which there isn't.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah. So what if your issue is not a lack of awareness, but you're still having trouble using that awareness to implement action?
Well, I guess that there wouldn't exactly be the kind of awareness that we would want. So we'd try to look for more of it because there's still a mystery there in what they're saying.
Yeah, it feels like they're missing awareness of what's in the way then, right? If you have all the awareness, but you still can't do it, then you're missing a piece.
Right? So that's kind of the tricky thing, is that like a lot of times our clients think they know what's going on. And this is also where very practically as we get to, so they may have clarified intent. This is the whole reason for this curriculum, is because they may have clarified intent, but they may not be aware to the resistance. Because if you're thinking about implementing, if I should do something and I can't do it, like there's something getting in the way. So what's the obstacle? What's the resistance? We'll get to that. The other thing about implementation of action is they may be setting an inappropriate goal. So there are things that we're going to teach you on day 3 that are a lot more practical about how to set goals so that you can actually like implement them, even if you know what the problem is. But I would say that for a lot of people who think that they understand what's going on, oftentimes there's more understanding to be had. How are y'all feeling about these questions? Are these like too hard, or y'all feeling okay?
No.
Bring on the hard ones.
Okay, chat, y'all hear that? Bring on the hard ones. Okay, you ready? Brian? How do you know what lane to pressure in a game of Dotes? Hard question.
Ooh. Whatever isn't the dead lane.
The opponent that's most
Just don't
likely
go
to
there.
tilt.
No, yeah, well, there's always one lane where like the enemy will gank, and then once you realize that, it's like just don't go there. And as long as you don't go there, you're good. All the 2 lanes are A1.
Okay, great. Here's a good one. How do you deal with a client hitting on you? Y'all had this happen yet? Y'all had romantic issues with clients?
I have one, not directly, but I did felt that sentiment. There was like a weird physical attraction, and he just kind of like brushed it off.
So how do y'all deal with that?
Bring
Yeah,
it
the
up.
way I guess my way of bringing it up is well, in this case, I didn't really bring it up because to me it seemed like it was like an accident, and it's more so I think I got the sense he kind of recognized that this was not like okay, and he's kind of like, all right, let's not make it a bigger issue than it was, kind of thing. So for me, I'd be reflective to how they felt or how they want to handle the situation. So if they like are super direct about it, then I'll reflect back the same like directness.
Yeah, so that sounds good. What do other coaches think about that? Brian's strategy of, if they want to talk about it, we'll talk about it. If they want to forget about it, we'll forget about it.
I
I
think
haven't
it's
had
good.
this. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that's a great like foundation and framework, and I think it's also important to like be clear about boundaries if it does come to that point.
Steve?
I haven't
I-
had this with attraction, but I have had it with friendship, where clients want to be friends after coaching ends. And it kind of honestly just it sucks because the coaching relationship means that that can't happen. Right, that's kind of where we have to draw that line. And also, if clients ever want to come back, we don't want that relationship to be blurred in any way. So I usually just have a direct conversation about that and like explain, yeah, would be cool. Unfortunately, it's not a thing we can do.
Why can't we do that?
It kind of protects both sides. From my side, it protects me from getting into a relationship that could potentially be very one-sided. The relationship that we have established and that we build with clients is by nature one-sided, and that's important because that's why we're here. But if we try to transform that into a friendship, the starting place is that it's 100% about them.
Yeah. I think the other very practical thing is just because they've stopped being your client now doesn't mean that they won't come back.
Yep.
Right. So when you sort of change the relationship and you become friends with someone, that sort of like prevents them from ever coming back as your client if they need something else. Another question. So I love the way that y'all handle it, by the way. So in terms of the boundary setting and stuff. So I think that, you know, if y'all keep on having moments with a client where it feels like there's some attraction, you probably want to talk about it explicitly and kind of bring it up and sort of lay some boundaries and just acknowledge what's happening. Oftentimes acknowledging tension in the room will actually decrease the tension. It'll just sort of fix it. So it's not really that big of a deal. And then, okay, so there's a couple of good ones. So is coaching helpful for someone who is successful in life, or is there a different program? How would y'all answer that?
My gut answer is I don't know.
Yeah, it depends on what they want to get out of coaching.
So what do you think is appropriate for people to want to get out of coaching?
If they're having trouble building the life they want to live, then that tends to be like if they're living the life they want to live, then I would have trouble understanding what they want to get out of coaching exactly.
Yeah, so I think that my answer would be that you can absolutely get something out of coaching. So I think we do a bad job at showcasing the worst parts of our clients. Like, so I kind of have this idea in mind of like the healthy gamer audience, which is like a 23-year-old college dropout, which is like not fair. So our audience is actually far more diverse than that, far more successful than we make them out to be. So I think we have, for example, a large number of like successful people like in the tech industry. You know, we have successful content creators and things like that that are like in our coaching program and things like that. We also had that's why we actually launched our high performance groups. And I think we may kind of suspend that and or relaunch it at the beginning of 2022. So we're gathering a lot of data and really understanding like how to optimize performance. And so we may offer that kind of next year. I think some of y'all were in the high performance or high potential groups, right? And content creators and things like that. So we do have like several programs that are geared towards people that are like on paper successful. Let's do maybe one more. What do I do if I keep losing interest in my goals during the process?
Keep making new goals.
It's definitely one piece of it. What do y'all think about other options?
I'd be curious to figure out like what is generating that I get that's sucking up like the interest. Because if constantly losing interest over time, that means it's kind of like declining. So I mean, something is like generating that decline.
Great. Right. So what's generating the loss in interest? What's generating your goals? How can you generate more appropriate goals? That's sort of what I heard from Steve when you said keep making new goals. Other thoughts?
I think maybe exploring a little bit of someone's cognitive style. Some people kind of get bored of things a little bit easier, and we have a few frameworks to try to explain that. I also wanted to make a quick comment about the previous question. So I'm kind of imagining someone who's kind of had a lot of success watching the stream, and there's a tendency of a lot of successful people to minimize a lot of their own problems. Like I've had a lot of unearned advantages. So, why would I try to seek help? But I think, and I'm not totally sure if our data backs this up. I'm pretty sure it does, but that a lot of content creators and successful people actually come in with more baggage in some ways than the people who aren't in those groups. That I think there's like higher anxiety and stuff like that. That we think that success is going to solve a lot of these problems in some ways, but it really doesn't. And especially if you're operating from the should columns, it can make things worse.
Well said.
Yeah, I agree with that. Even in regular clients, I've seen like this idea that, well, I have these successes, so I'm not allowed to feel bad about these other things, right? Regardless of if that sex is romantic, career, school.
How do you all help a client like that?
Sort of like reflecting it back to them, almost like with the raising awareness, what we talked about today, like sort of raising the awareness in the negatives of like sort of like seeing what's happening in their lives that they're almost neglecting. Like I've had clients who are successful, but then sometimes they just forget to eat, and like they don't provide self-care to themselves, even though they're quite successful in their career.
So Kent sort of points out that sometimes they may be neglecting themselves. What about other people? How would y'all approach someone who isn't allowed to suffer because they have advantages or privilege?
One of the ways that I've done it. Oh, go ahead.
Let's start with Alan and then move to Steve.
One of the things that I've had to do is try to slow them down a little bit, because there's so much emotional intensity and they're like going really fast, and they get really good at subtly invalidating their own feelings. And so I think like intentionally, like I have to slow down my own voice, especially with some of these streamers and content creators. I mean, they can just speak so like fast and so well. And, once you just kind of slowed them down and you can see the tension relieving, that you have to just dig a little bit deeper in order to bring some of this emotion to the surface. Because even when we talk about it explicitly, like they'll still, they make an art form out of hiding this stuff.
An art form out of hiding this stuff. Love it. Steve, what were you going to say?
Depending on the client, I've done it both by providing them a space where they're allowed to have those emotions because they might not have had that experience before. And also kind of digging into where that idea comes from, right? Whether it's a past memory, whether it's a childhood issue, whether it's something that they feel just now because they're comparing themselves to a lot of their peers. So exploring both those ideas has been really helpful.
Yeah. So I think I love y'all's answers. So I think that this is a big part of a lot of what we see. So it's interesting because we see the flip side of it too. So one is that people are privileged or they have some advantages, and so they think like, oh, like I'm not allowed to suffer. I think it's a useful thing to explore with them. Like, what do you because all of them recognize pretty easily that other people in their situations, they can be compassionate towards, right? So if I'm like an engineer at Google and I'm like lucky and successful, I don't get to complain. But if they're like peers of mine that complain, like I'll let them complain. I can treat them with compassion, but I'm not willing to treat myself with compassion. And then the flip side of the coin is sometimes we'll have people who, feel like all they deserve is failure and all they deserve is suffering. and that they don't deserve to be happy or be successful or like whatever, right? And you can also explore like, where does that idea come from? Do other people in your situation get to improve their lives? Why don't you get to improve your life? Awesome. I guess y'all want to do like one more maybe? Or y'all want to meditate? We want to make a meditation suggestion? Oh, here's a good one. Well, let's do meditation suggestion in a second. Y'all think about it. But can I become an effective coach if I'm going through my own yet unresolved traumas?
Still working on mine.
So what do other people think?
Most definitely yes.
I wasn't hoping for such confident answers. What's it like to, be working through your own stuff as a coach? Like, don't you have to have everything settled before you start helping other people?
I think that goes back to the idea of like perfectionism. Right? There'll always be a thing that you're not good enough at, that you need to be better at, that you need to process. And I think being a coach and being more aware of these things and having open conversations about them actually helps me to process my own traumas.
Yeah, definitely agree with Steve of where now coaching has kind of made me more aware of mental health and then my own mental health. So rather than like pushing it away before, actually like sitting down with it and seeing that I am just a human being and that I also not like a perfect person. So being able to be vulnerable to my own self.
I love to hear actually how y'all are embodying like the approach that we ask you to teach your clients, which is like, you don't have to be perfect to get started, right? That's another thing that's paralyzing is like, I want to do it perfectly. I'm not going to apply to college unless I know I get a 4.0 GPA. And that life is a work in progress and that you kind of live in the present. You don't worry so much about like the goal and how you measure up to it. It's about working on yourself. Just so people are aware, in terms of having unresolved traumas, I don't know exactly what that means, but we do actually have pretty high expectations on our coaches in terms of the services that they deliver to the clients. So, having a history of a traumatic experience or even like a mental health diagnosis, like that doesn't preclude you from becoming a coach. I don't think we don't ask you about any of your like personal health information that I'm aware of. At the same time, your traumas should not be so unresolved that they interfere with what your duty as a coach is. So we do expect our coaches to be able to take care of themselves enough to where they can like help another human being. And if they're not in the headspace to be able to consistently do that, then I don't think you're ready to be a coach. What do y'all think about that? That's my opinion, but curious
I think
about.
it's fair. It's very true that you have to be in a space where you're capable of having these conversations, where your own traumas aren't going to get in the way.
Yeah, there's like as we talked about duty and responsibility, there's a duty and responsibility to be a coach, but then also like being able to have self-care for yourself, that it's not interfering with the responsibility that you have to our clients.
Awesome. So what do y'all want to do for meditation today?
There's a few that I like doing.
Okay.
I'm just having a hard time knowing what's appropriate for a stream.
So why don't we start with this? Like, is there anything from Dr. K's guide, like any meditation that y'all want to build on or have questions about or interested in, but like don't know how to do properly?
The one that I found interesting was I don't know what it's called, but you sort of stare at a picture for a while and then sort of focus in at different parts of the picture. And then after that, close your eyes. I thought that was a really interesting experience for me. So it'd be kind of cool to do meditations like that.
Okay. So that's going to be Trataka on a yantra. Do we have any other nominations?
Yeah. I remember a couple, I don't know how many weeks ago, but you did a meditation on like insecurity or judgment, where you kind of sat down and like you almost like talked through it, and you like asked and like questions like, oh, where does that insecurity live? Where does that, like, when you feel it, that physical sensation, and sort of just trying to let it go. And I just remember you saying the words like, you are real, and like, this is real, and like whatever you're feeling is just feelings. And that was, I don't know, that was kind of powerful to me. I don't know what it was called, but you kind of did that a couple sessions ago.
Okay. So, so we can actually combine those two, okay? So I'm going to teach y'all something a little bit, in a sense, advanced, but not, it's not hard. It's just, so we're going to talk a little bit, so we're going to combine the two. So we're going to do Yantra Trataka, and then we're going to do like an exploratory meditation afterward. So there are two kinds of, there are lots of kinds of meditation. So if y'all have watched Dr. K's guide, this gets explained very clearly. But y'all remember that there's like inquisitive meditations and focusing meditations. So basically, like, they're different cognitive temperaments, right? No one's mind is exactly the same. So a big part of developing a successful meditation practice is in recognizing what kind of mind you have and what kind of meditation practice to engage in that will be useful for you. So we want to match the meditative practice to like your cognitive fingerprint or your goals. So, and there are two dimensions of this. So one is that if we want to do a very strong inquisitive practice, so Kent sort of mentioned, like figuring out where the insecurity within you exists and what is the nature of that insecurity. It can be hard to sit down and just start doing that, right? So if I just say like, sit down, now find the insecurity, go. Ah, there it is, done, GG, right? That's difficult. Because the kind of mindset that you need to be able to really look into yourself and be able to like really discern deeper parts of yourself is a very focused mind. And if we think for a second about things like, creativity or the flow state, cultivating a particular state of consciousness facilitates internal growth, understanding, or performance. And so then the question kind of becomes, okay, if I want to do an inquisitive meditation, but I can't just sit down and do it, how do I get into the state of mind to where I can have a productive inquisitive meditation? And that's when we use a particular dharana or focusing technique. So Trataka is a dharana or focusing technique. So oftentimes what I'll recommend to people is that there's some meditations that you can use to clear your mind. And then once you have a clear mind, you can direct it towards a particular goal or exploration. And so what I'd sort of say is use a dharana first. So that can be like a breathing technique. It's usually a technique where you're doing something. So I'm looking at something, I'm listening to something, I'm breathing in a particular way. I'm directing my attention to a particular point. Once you do that for a while, you'll kind of get into this super chill state. And then you can explore or direct your mind in a different way. So when I say direct, like that's when you can use a sankalpa or like a resolve. So you can chant a mantra or something like that, like it'll like sink in deep and have more an effect. Or you can do an exploration. So we're going to start by doing external yantra. So we're going to look, and if you guys are curious about some of these phrases and stuff, like it's all in the guide, which is why we built it in the first place. So we're going to start by doing external yantra. And then Kent, what I want you to do after the internal yantra phase is think about one thing that you're struggling with. Okay, this goes for y'all as well. So we're going to do external yantra, internal yantra, and then exploration. So let me think about, I'm going to give different people different tasks. Okay, so if you're in the Tom camp, what we're going to do is don't worry about the internal exploration. Tom, what I want you to try to do is hold on to the internal yantra as long as possible. Okay? So one camp is going to like hold on to the internal yantra as much as possible. I'll explain what that means in a second. For the exploration camp, if y'all want to understand why you are a certain way or where a particular insecurity comes from, if you have a particular goal that you want to change about yourself, we're going to do external yantra first. And then as we move into internal yantra, you can do that for a little bit. And then I want you to pick a quality. Like, Kent, give us a quality that you struggle with, if you're okay with that.
Eczema. If I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's like the skin can.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, hold on. Let me think about this. So for a physical health condition. Do you have active eczema right now?
Yeah, like I even have psoriasis. I think that's what it's called as well.
Okay, that's tricky. But let me think about that. Okay, so Kent, this is going to be a little bit tricky, but I think we can manage this. So you know with eczema, before there's a rash, like what comes first, the rash or the itch?
For me, I think it comes with the rash because it just starts forming.
For psoriasis or eczema?
Oh, for eczema, but I think for psoriasis, the itch comes. It almost feels like it.
So that's okay. I think this is going to be good. Okay, so this is what I want you to do. Okay, so I want you to focus on eczema for a second. Let's step away from psoriasis. And what I want you to really figure out is like, so in eczema, you scratch it, right?
Yes.
And so do you scratch even before a rash happens?
Yes.
Okay, so I want you to focus on the origin of the itch. And then what I want you to do is see if you can find the itch in the absence of the rash. So like close your eyes and like, you may have like sensations from part of your body, right? But you're not looking at the rash. You're just, there's going to be an internal signal that the eczema is sending you. That I want you to focus in on. And then what I want you to do is notice that that is just a signal and see what happens when you receive the signal of the itch and pay attention to like your ability or inability to tolerate it. So you may find that you can tolerate the itch for some amount of time and then you have to give in, or you may find like just try to figure it out. Does that make sense? Play with it.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So I know this is like complicated instructions. So I guess if you all have eczema, you can do this too. So let's find... hold on. Let's pick a yantra that will help with eczema. That one will help with periods. There we go. Oh my God. Wait, what the... Okay. All right, so we're going to screen share. Okay, so now I'm going to walk y'all through this process. Okay, so let's screen share with y'all. Done. Okay, and then we're going to screen share with chat. Or maybe even... there we go. Okay, let's do this one, okay? So, this is a yantra. So the practice of Trataka is fixed point gazing, so it means looking at something without blinking. So what we're going to do, if you guys can kind of see this, is we're going to look right here, okay? I'm going to fix my pupils on this point right here. But then, even as I look at this, what I can do is notice, even though I'm focused right here in the center, I can notice the things outside of the field of my view. So I'm not going to look over here, but I can notice that there's a shape over here, notice there's a shape over here, notice there's a shape over here, notice there's a shape here, there's a shape here, there's a shape here. And even if I focus on the center, like it'll be clear that this is a triangle, that this is a triangle, that this is a circle, that these are lotus petals. And if I focus over here, I can see there's a shape, but it'll feel fuzzy. Do y'all get that? I'm going to check in with chat. Does that make sense, chat? Okay. So if you don't notice the petals, that's fine. So external trataka is that we're going to look at this center point without blinking for about 60 seconds. If you really need to blink, you can. But you may notice that your eyes get watery and stuff like that. Let the tears come out of your eyes. It's no big deal. And then what we're going to do is close our eyes. And once we close our eyes, we enter the stage of internal trataka. So in internal trataka, there's this process in your eyes where you have these pigments that will exhaust. So anytime you see a color, it's a pigment sort of triggering in your photoreceptors. And as those pigments exhaust, you'll be left with an after image. So when you close your eyes, you'll see this image in some form, but it'll be like the negative of that image. That's internal trataka. So the cool thing about internal trataka is that you can continue to see it even with your eyes closed. So for Tom's camp, we're going to just try to hold on to the internal image after our eyes are closed for as long as we can. For the Kent crowd, what we're going to do is then once you can hold on to it for a little bit, but then your mind should be nice and focused, and then turn your mind to the sensation of itchiness and to your rash, and try to see what it's like to tolerate that itchiness without scratching. We good? If y'all are confused about this stuff, there's like literally 20-minute explanations about these practices in the guide, okay? So let's go ahead and sit up straight, close our eyes for a second. We're going to start by taking 3 deep breaths. And now slowly open your eyes, kind of half-lidded gaze, and focus on the dot in the center. Try not to blink. Drive your attention into it. Look at it, look at it, look at it. Just focus on the dot. Your eyes may be tempted to wander. You may be distracted by physical sensations. You can kind of half close your lids if you need to. Let the tears come. And now as you focus on the dot, you may notice some color disturbances outside of it. So be it, don't change your attention. Don't let it wander. Focus fully on the dot. And now what I'm going to ask you to do is, even while your eyes are on the dot, I want you to move your attention away from the center of your eyes, the center of your gaze. Notice the triangle outside of it. And then outside of that is another triangle. And then outside of that is a third triangle. Outside of that is a circle. And so in that way, while keeping your gaze in the center of the dot, notice the different shapes. Zoom out with your awareness and see however many shapes you can find. We've been practicing for about 90 seconds. We're going to try to keep going. Go all the way out. See the petals, the squares, but don't let your gaze move. Move all the way to the edge. Let the tears flow. If it becomes very, very uncomfortable, close your eyes. And now start to collapse back in towards the center. Notice the outward shapes, the black box. Come in towards the circles, the petals, the rings. Not so fast. Over the next 20 seconds or so, return to the dot. And now close your eyes. Take a moment to feel the relief. And now gaze on the internal image on the screen of your eyelids. And notice as colors and shapes emerge. Now you can choose to focus on those, or from this state of mind, start to inquire. If you have a mantra or a sankalp, you can repeat those. If you have eczema, start to find the origin of the itch. Notice what happens to your desire to scratch. I want you to see where that itch comes from. Where does it originate from? You may start to notice other bodily sensations. If you don't have an itch, you can zero in on a discomfort. See precisely where in your body that discomfort originates from. See precisely what makes it hard to tolerate that discomfort. We'll continue for about 60 more seconds. And now place your palms together in front of you in Namaste position. And then rub them together, rub, 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 rub. Feel the heat, the tension, the friction, and cup them over your eyes. Take a deep breath in, and while your palms are covering your eyes, slowly open your eyes as you exhale. And go ahead and let your hands come down. Thoughts, perspectives?
It was interesting. I don't know what they call that screen. I was able to hold the image for a few moments. I could see a lot of the shapes. It's pretty cool. That image kind of wandered and faded a bit. And like after about 30 seconds, it kind of like fully faded, like I couldn't bring it back. So then I started to follow your words about, insecurities. So then I started thinking about like a girl that I'm talking to and like insecurities I have about talking to her. So I started thinking about that. And then after I rubbed my eyes and cupped them over, I sort of saw I can even see a little bit of that after image of the picture there.
Yeah. Kent, what about you?
Yeah, I was like in somewhat of the same camp as Tom, where when I closed my eyes from that image, each time I kind of tried to reach out for it, it kind of went away. So I kind of just like took a step back in my mind, and then it sort of like came back into focus. And then when we sort of try to search around the insecurities and like trying to see where that itch kind of comes from, there's a lot of like things that kind of maybe come from like stressful things or things that are kind of happening in my life that causes that itch.
Interesting. So a couple of interesting things about Trataka. So internal Trataka is one of my favorite practices because a lot of times we tell people like you need to let go, right? But then like how do you practice or train letting go? And I like internal Trataka because y'all may have noticed this. If you hold on to the image too tightly, it disappears. It's kind of weird. And so you have to learn how to like let go of the image, and then it like floats to the surface. So this is one of the really fascinating aspects of meditation, where I think that there's like a cognitive process of like letting go. And what I really do believe is that meditation, different kinds of meditations will actually work out different like cognitive functions. And internal Trataka, like, because the feedback loop on whether you're letting go too much or too little is so immediate. It's like if you hold on a bit too tight, it starts to go away. If you let go too much, it gets shattered. It like blows away like a puff of smoke. Right? And so internal Trataka, I think, is a very good practice to like literally train your mind to be like relaxed and focused, to like let go and still like try. Because that's a really common conundrum. Everyone is like, how do I try if I let go? Because isn't my attachment to the thing that drives the behavior? And if you do internal Trataka, you'll find that there's like this beautiful balance of focusing completely, but in a relaxed form. And everyone thinks that focus should be intense. Like, how do you get to the flow state? The flow state isn't intense. It's like, it's not relaxing either. It's kind of like you're just, it's neither. It's like in the middle. So this is what I love about these practices. So someone was asking, about, there's like a lot of explanation of the stages of different Trataka and all those terms and things like that. That's all in Dr. K's guide. So if y'all are curious about that, check out those videos on Trataka. All right. Awesome. Thank you all very much for coming. I hope the meditation was helpful. Kent, you kind of threw me, threw a curveball my way, but I really liked it. And who should we raid? That's the last thing that I'll ask of y'all.
Are you asking us coaches?
Coaches, chat, whoever. Who should we raid?
Hikaru.
Hikaru? I'm getting, some people are saying Alinity, Amaz, Sidion, or Hikaru. What should we do?
We can do Sidion, because I remember you did a stream with
All right,
her, I think.
rating Sidion, go. Go, 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 go. Okay, thanks a lot. We'll see you all tomorrow at 11 a.m., okay?
Peace.
Adios. Okay, go, 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 go. Raid Sidion. GG.